Okay, hi guys. In this lesson, I'm going to ask you to answer this question. Okay, so I'm going to remind you of a few things that we need to do when we're answering an essay question. Okay, so just have a read of it. Okay, first off. Okay, so let's have a look at what you've got to do. So the very first thing that you have to do is you have to bug that question. Okay, so we have to put a box around the instruction words. Can you just do that with yours, please? So just pause this, and if you need to print it off or copy it into a Word document, do that. And then just box, what do you think the instruction word is? Okay, so hopefully you've got the same instruction word as I have, which is assess the validity. Basically, do you agree or not? Okay, how valuable is this view? And all of your essays, okay, with British history will all be a statement like this. So this is a statement, this is someone's judgment, and you need to go and explain what you agree with this statement and what you disagree with this statement on. Okay, so assess the validity. How valuable is it? How much do you agree with it? Okay, so do you agree and do you disagree? And basically that's what I want you to do within this essay. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? And overall, what is your judgment? Okay, so you have to do that with all of the essays that you will get with British, and they will all start with a phrase, okay, a statement. Do you agree with the statement? Do you disagree with it? Okay. The next thing is that we need to do is we need to underline the keywords in the question. Okay, so just pause this, underline what you think are the keywords. Okay, once you've done that, press start again. Okay, so hopefully you've got the same ones that I have. It's about David Lloyd George, okay, and it's a statement about his lust for money and fame over his moral purpose. Okay, it's quite a damning statement about him, really, isn't it? It's trying to say David Lloyd George went into office, he went in to be a MP because he had this moral purpose. He had this aim to make people's lives better, to support people, to provide welfare. And actually what ends up happening is he's driven by this lust for money and fame. Okay, so that's the argument. Do you agree? Yes, he's driven by money and fame. No, he has a moral purpose. Okay, so that's what we're basically looking at. And then the third thing is that you need to, and this one says glance around your plan. You always need to have a plan, okay? I always have this discussion with students. Some students say, Miss, it takes time away from me writing my essay. I don't need a plan. I can do it without a plan. Have a plan, please. Have a plan, okay? Include your plan. When you upload this onto Teams, include your plan so we can see what your arguments are. If I asked you to drive somewhere, okay, or take a train somewhere, you wouldn't just rock up at any old train station, okay? You wouldn't just get in the car and not know what direction you were going in. You need to have a plan, especially if your sense of direction is anything like mine. You need to have a plan. You need to have an idea what road or what judgment you're going to have, okay, and you need to go along. So have a plan, please. In the real thing, okay, you've got 45 minutes, and in that time you've got to read the question, understand the question, bug the question, plan the question, and then write the question, okay? Planning is really important. Okay, so we're now going to do the third thing. We're going to glance at the marks. Every source question has 25 marks. And that means that in the exam, you have 45 minutes to do it. Okay? So I really strongly suggest, you're at an advantage. Before I send you off to go and write this, you know what the question is, and we're going to come up with a little bit of a plan together. Okay? But in the real thing, if you were to sit down and do this, you would spend 5 minutes reading the question, bugging the question, planning the question. So 5 minutes to read, bug, and plan. And then you've got 40 minutes to write it. Okay? Right. So now we've got an idea what this question's actually asking us. Was David Lloyd George driven by money and fame, or was he driven by moral purpose? Okay. Now I'm going to go through my plan, and it links with our lesson, our previous lesson. Okay. Your plan can look different, and that's absolutely fine. Okay. And you might come up with some different arguments to me. Again, that's absolutely fine. Okay. The joys of history is that there's no right or wrong answer. That's why I love reading it. That's why we all love reading it. That's why there's so many books about it, because there are lots of different views about it. Okay. So this is, and I've taken this literally from last lesson when we looked at whether he was a hero and whether he was a villain. Okay. Now the really, really important thing here that I didn't mention, and I perhaps should have done, I should have written on here, is we need to think about our dates. What dates do we need to think from and to? Most exam questions have at least one date in it. Okay, this one doesn't. So when would you start and when would you end? I would start 1909, People's Budget. That's when I'd probably start. Might even start 1906, because David Lloyd George is instrumental in the Liberals and their election campaigns in that 1906 election. So I could start in 1906. I would end in 1922. 1922, David Lloyd George is no longer Prime Minister, and he's still a minister, so he's still a member of Parliament, okay? But he is no longer the Prime Minister. And so I would end it in 1922. So the dates that I think you need to include is probably 1906, definitely from 1909 up to 1922, okay? That's really important. If you forget the early stuff, you are missing some really key things especially about his moral purpose, and you can link that with the idea of new liberalism and stuff. Okay, so this is just to recap some of the arguments that you could use. Again, you can use different ones to me. That's absolutely fine, okay? But I've tried to link them together a bit because in the real exam, you should be aiming to have between 3 and 4 main paragraphs, big chunky paragraphs, okay? And you should start off with your judgment, and then you should end with a counter judgment. That's why it's a really big chunky paragraph, okay? So you might start off by saying he's a hero, he was focused on moral purpose, okay? And then you might counter that with an argument for, in the same paragraph, an argument to say, no, actually, he is driven by fame and he wanted to be Prime Minister after the First World War, and that's why he allows this coalition to happen. Okay, so an argument, one-sided, one argument, and then in the same paragraph you have the counter one, and then you need like a judgment. Overall, therefore, is he driven by moral purpose, or is he driven by lust for money and fame? Okay, and remember, use those words in the question. Use the phrase moral purpose. Use the phrase lust for money and fame. Okay, that's what the question's asking you to use. Use it, and then we can go, yep, they know that question. Excellent. Okay, so these are just some arguments you could use. They're not all of them, but I just thought I'd include them so we had a little bit of a quick plan. Okay, right. Please remember this worksheet that I've made. Okay, it helps you to write a history essay. It's got some top tips there just on the side, which will help you. Remembering to bug that question, stick to the dates. We talked about the dates. Definitely start 1909. I'd probably start 1906 and go up to 1922. You've got 45 minutes. So like I said, spend 5 minutes to plan, 40 minutes to write. And then I'll go through the structure in a little bit more in the next slide. Okay, so you should be aiming to have 3 to 4 big paragraphs. Those paragraphs might end up looking like nearly a whole page. That's fine. Okay, that's absolutely fine, as long as it has this structure. Okay, as long as it has a point. Do you think he's driven by fame and money, or do you think he had a moral purpose? Give me some evidence. Okay, facts, things that he does, events. Analyze, what does that tell us? Does that tell us he was driven by money and fame, or moral purpose? And then give me the counter argument. However, okay, maybe there's some examples that he was driven by moral purpose, but there are also arguments to say that he was driven by money and fame. Okay, and then evaluate it. Go back to that question. So in your judgment, to summarize, in conclusion, therefore, David Lloyd George was driven by, okay? Link it back with that question. And there's some, just on the top corner, there are some words, phrases, connective words, etc., that might help you when you're trying to use evaluative language, because evaluative language is really good to kind of make those links and make us clear on your judgment. Okay, so aim to please use piece, point, evidence, analysis. What does that evidence tell us? Counter argument, so on the other side, however, and then evaluate. This therefore shows us overall David Lloyd George was driven by money and fame, or he was driven ultimately by moral purpose. Okay, do that with every paragraph. That's why you will end up with 3 or 4 really big ones, but they all answer that question. Okay, they should go back to that judgment, what you overall think about David Lloyd George. Okay, and I've also included here, and I've included it in the assignment as well, some structure strips, just to help some of you if you want to use them. Some students definitely like using them, okay, just to give you a reminder of maybe how much to be writing, and the things that you could be doing to make sure that you've got that piece structure. And what some people like doing is copying that onto a Word document, okay, taking it off, and then writing next to it, or some people like having it and then ticking, yep, I've got a point there, yes, I've got evidence there, yes, I've got some analysis. Okay, so some people like using them in different ways, but they might help you with just remembering how to structure your answers, remembering what piece is. I like to use something called DCA in your introduction, just because I can say it quickly too. Have you got DCA? Okay. Have you defined what we mean by moral purpose? Have you given me some kind of context? So maybe his Focus changes as time goes on because of a drive to remain in power, or maybe he's doing it because he feels like it's in the best interest of the country. Okay, what's your context, and therefore what's your argument? Is he driven by money and fame, or is he actually driven by this moral purpose? Okay, your introduction should be short. That's why it's short on the structure strips. You should be aiming for about 3 or 4 sentences, no more than 4. Nice and short, really succinct. Tell me what you think, okay? And then go into your strongest argument. What do you think? Do you think he's driven by money and fame, or do you think he is ultimately driven by moral purpose? Okay, like I said, aim to have 3 to 4 of those big chunky paragraphs, okay, which have got an argument and a counter argument and a judgment in them. Okay, the reason that it's better to do those big chunky paragraphs is because if you run out of time, so if you know, hopefully you won't, but if you only manage to write 2 paragraphs, at least you know that you have covered your AO1, your AO2, and your AO3. You've got some knowledge, you've got some analysis, and you've got some evaluation, okay? If you do it in a different structure, you might not have covered all of those aspects. So ideally 3 or 4 big chunky paragraphs. Most students can write 3 chunky paragraphs in 45 minutes with an introduction and a conclusion. Some can write 4, but most end up writing 3, okay? And then for your conclusion, use what I call as if. What's your argument? Is he driven by fame and money? Is he driven by moral purpose? Okay, substantiate that, give me some evidence. In case, however, he might have been driven by, and then focus back on that question. Overall, in conclusion, subsequently, David Lloyd George was driven by. Okay, and really make sure, number 8 on there, really make sure that you've got facts, you've got dates, you've got names, you've got events. You know this stuff, okay? Don't make it up. Yeah, okay, so hopefully that will help you structure this. Give yourself 45 minutes. Sit down in a nice quiet, if you can find a quiet space, go and sit down in a nice quiet space, plan it for 5 minutes. You can use the plan if you want to help you that I've done there, okay? But you don't have to use it, and you might want to add some other stuff, okay? But give yourself 45 minutes, please. And then remember to upload it onto Teams so that I can then mark it. Okay, brilliant. Have a lovely day, guys. See you later. Bye.